Thanks, Cahirla, and for the brief opportunity to comment on the summary economic statement. Last weekend, Cahirla, there were reports that Fine Gael was trying out various general election slogans, such as, I quote, "Let Leo lead on," end quote, based on the Sean the Mass slogan of the 1960s. But listening to the bluster and barefaced attempts to rewrite history this morning by Taoiseach Varadkar in response to Deputy Doherty's question on this document, a more appropriate slogan might be, and I quote, "You just can't believe Leo," or something maybe more alliterative in that regard, Cahirla. The Taoiseach, of course, he ignored his own vote for the blanket bank guarantee, which wrecked our state finances, and his continuous support for savage cuts and austerity measures alongside Fianna Fáil since 2008. And shamefully, of course, this included his own disastrous stint in the Department of Health. And elements of this brazen deception are evident in this document. Chapter 4, the Public Expenditure Strategy, constantly references rises in state expenditure between 1998 and 2018, as if the failures of the Department of Finance and the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael parties from 2008 to 2018 had never happened. So the outrageous cuts in health, social protection, education, housing, public service pay, other expenditures are glossed over down to 2017, and total emphasis is placed on this sustainable expenditure for 2019 and beyond. The innovations mentioned in Chapter 4 in relation to public service administration reforms are, of course, valuable. Our Public Service 2020 framework and new expenditure invigilation, including the performance budgeting, the Irish Government Economic and Evaluation Service and the spending review process, they are useful improvements, Minister, to ensure that budgetary policy is transparent and efficient. The summary economic statement is also important when it focuses on Ireland's productivity potential in Chapter 2. It's always been rightly believed in economics, it's an axiom of economics when we studied at a college, Minister, that productivity in fact is everything. And the summary economic statement references the work of the Economic and Social Research Institute of ESRI that Irish-owned firms have reaped only limited spillover benefits from the activities of foreign multinationals in terms of productivity. The Department of Finance's own study, of course, in collaboration with the OECD, disturbingly found that the productivity gap between high productivity and mainly foreign-owned firms and the rest of the economy has widened over the past decade. There was a similar widening in the services sector. The recent OECD economic study of Ireland provided a menu of policy recommendations to improve productivity growth in relation to domestic firms, including tapering of research and development supports and improving managerial skills. Yesterday at the Budget Oversight Committee, ISME proposed tax expenditures costing €54 million, Minister, to improve entrepreneurial relief, with additional cuts in capital gains tax and increase in the R&D tax credit. But IFAC, the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council, in an earlier presentation of the committee warned that the €1 billion tax expenditure in R&D tax credits is far too large, and these credits need to be much more targeted to improve productivity in domestic firms. So the Department and Minister, I think if you're serious about productivity and controlling tax expenditure, you have to carefully evaluate all of these credits and reliefs by early October, and that of course also creates more fiscal space. The statement before us, it seems far too sanguine, Minister, in relation to risks to the economy and exchequer. We've witnessed already several rate rises by the Federal Reserve, and quantitative easing is tapering towards closure. Obviously, the uncertainty of the Irish economy posed by Brexit continues to be very destabilising, and it's again regrettable that we seem to be no further advanced in the key Brexit negotiations this June than we were 6 months ago at the first negotiation of a backstop. And with just 9 months to go to the British withdrawal, Taoiseach Varadkar and yourself, Minister, you can't give us any credible fiscal roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years. With our corporation tax take so heavily dependent on US multinationals, the developing trade wars arising from Trump's America First policy are also potentially disastrous for a small open economy like Ireland's. President Juncker of the EU Commission, of course, is here tomorrow in this chamber. He famously ran Luxembourg as Prime Minister as a haven for tax avoidance and tax evasion. But Ireland has just been referenced, of course, in a US study as the world's biggest tax haven, with funds passing through our financial system equal to the size of the UK or German economies. The well-known Greek commentator, of course, and former Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis also repeatedly said we behave like leeches in international taxation policy. These claims, of course, were addressed recently by IFAC, one of the economists of IFAC at the Budgetary Oversight Committee. But the damage of these claims to our international reputation is very serious. And Minister, you yourself have been noticeably silent in this regard. I myself have raised the huge debt refinancing issues for 2018 and 2019 with the Taoiseach in this House and with you yourself, Minister. And we continue to be, of course, the most indebted country per capita in the EU with our debt at 100% of GNI star. But on a positive note, I suppose the SES report says our debt will decline decline relatively down to 2021 to about 60%, I think, of actual GDP. But all these risks combine to create a very serious backdrop to the summary economic statement. But it's the failure of government policy in providing essential resources for health, housing, education, disability and other key services, plus the barren 8 years of the past barren 8 years and failing to provide key investment in all these national services, which actually provides the biggest risk to our economy and society. The Taoiseach and yourself, Minister, you're attempting to adopt the guise of fiscal prudence and responsibility in the run into Budget 2019. Of course, you and your Fianna Fáil partners took the opposite road when you destroyed our national finances from September 2008 and decimated our key public services. The expenditure benchmark table on page 18 of the report therefore shows net fiscal space of only 1.4 billion following the adjustments to the gross fiscal space of 3.9 billion. This, of course, provides provision for a rainy day fund of £500 million, which I'll return to. We're also informed that 2.6 billion of the planned budget expenditure of 3.4 billion is already committed to earlier expenditures, leaving us at only 800 million, you're saying, Minister, for new measures. But given the huge needs of our society, and it's incredible, of course, Minister, that you're considering spending up to 270 million. Was it 266 million you gave somebody as a figure in tax cuts, which ESRI has strongly advised against. Indeed, ESRI, which reports to the Budgetary Oversight Committee last week, has rightly stated that investment in the new National Development Plan would be much preferable. But a striking feature of this summary economic statement report on the Minister's own reflections is that there seems to be no plans to broaden the tax base. Such a broadening, and you talk about it, Minister, but there's no action. Such a broadening needs to happen anyway because of the volatility of corporation tax, especially from 2020. But as Professor Seamus Coffey of IFAC recently told the Budgetary Oversight Committee, a broadening of the tax base is the only avenue to address our resource and infrastructural deficits and to comply, if we want to do so, with EU fiscal rules. Whether there are future changes in the CAM, I know the Department, some of our officials are working on that, an expenditure benchmark and so on, or other aspects indeed of the expenditure benchmark. Yesterday also, for example, we heard from Ms Patricia King of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, who again urged that the 9% VAT hospitality rate be scrapped and raising an additional 500 million for the Exchequer. Tasked the think tank on social change while urging an increased spend of 1.1 billion on social housing, in addition to what you guys are not spending at the moment. Also called for boosting tax revenue by £1 billion by reducing pension tax relief to the lower rate. Task also advocated raising nearly 300 million extra by adding a third rate of income tax for incomes above 120,000. Many of us in these benches, Minister, year after year, the reports I think are in the bottom drawer where Mr Noonan left them before you. We've advocated a higher rate on higher incomes, and indeed including the incomes of ourselves, of us TDs. At the Budgetary Oversight Committee, we've also discussed the potential equalisation of diesel and petrol taxes and a significant additional revenue which might be raised by a gradual equalisation of excise in these key fuels. But nowhere in the summary economic statement or the Minister's statement are there any references to truly sustainable budgeting by increasing taxation on those who can afford to pay more. So I believe Minister Donoghue is trying to sneak back into government by blathering about prudence and fiscal responsibility along with your Taoiseach, when in fact your party and Fianna Fáil devastated our sovereign wealth fund and exploded our national debt over the last decade. And of course Ireland did reach its MTO under the fiscal rules in 2017, which is one of the astonishing things in those figures, Minister, and we're on schedule to meet the MTO again in 2019 and finally into the future based on the figures in this report. But given our strategic investment fund, our bank assets, our share of the Apple tax monies and the dire needs of our population, and a lot of us would like to see you again withdrawn from legal action on the Apple tax situation, I believe it's insulting to the hundreds of thousands of our citizens in grave need of housing or medical treatment to propose a rainy day fund in 2019. I told you that, Minister, at the Budgetary Oversight Committee, and in fact a number of us did. It's raining, it's pouring in fact in metaphorical terms for so many of our fellow citizens, and it's just the wrong time to be talking in these kind of terms about a sovereign wealth fund. Indeed, we did have a very strong sovereign wealth fund, but your party and Fianna Fáil devastated it and blew it away on us. And of course, by some of the decisions your predecessor, Minister Noonan, made, even into 2013, you ensured that our sovereign wealth fund would still be nobbled well into the future. I believe additional resources might be used, of course, to pay down some national debt, but I don't believe there's any case for borrowing in 2019 to produce a rainy day fund. This proposal again seems part of the Taoiseach's hollow efforts to impress EU leaders who in reality, of course, care very little often about our country. So in conclusion, Cathaoirleach, I want to thank the officials in the Department of Finance who prepare the summary economic statement, which in conjunction with the earlier stability update report, it gives deputies in the House and indeed the people we represent good insights into producing a future solid fiscal policy for our nation. But I would hope that in the next 3 months, in the run into October, that Minister Donoghue and Taoiseach Varadkar, that they would come forward with a budget that, as Deputy Doherty said this morning, that would address the crying out needs of our nation in housing and in health, in disability and all the other areas, and would stop trying to flim-flam the nation. Thanks, Cam, or Cahir.